My name is Vitor Ribeiro. I am a geography teacher at University of Minho, located in Braga, Portugal. This is a study of my PhD student, Marilia Borges, and we were focused on the role of geotechnologies in the teaching and learning process, namely of basic and secondary students. So the communication is related with the student perception of the use of augmented reality in geography education, and is financed by the Lab2PT Laboratory of Research, where I belong. This is the outline of my presentation. I will start with some thoughts on theoretical basis, methodology we use to understand the students' knowledge and abilities to work with geotechnologies, the outcomes, and some final remarks. We know that recently, and namely in this century, technology is playing a very important role in our daily lives. We use technology everywhere, students are using it everywhere, but what we are missing these days, at least in Europe and some more expressive in Portugal, is that in classes, technology is very, very difficult to get in. So it's very difficult to understand how students are working with their mobile phones to use most of the geotechnologies for their daily lives. And when they go to the schools, to the classrooms, they back only to the traditional method. So we need more attention to know how to input this in the classes and take profit from this for the learning process. We know that internet and mobile learning grow very, very fast. Social media is now everywhere, and we know that students are taking many time using it. The mobile, the cloud computing, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, big data. So everything, some of them, and all of these concepts are now entering in our daily lives. How can we take the advantages of those broad of technology to improve the learning process? So in geography, we normally need to put the students thinking critically and to solve problems. They must be motivated to understand the things that occur in the space. They need to understand how to interpret, how to know and take everything from the data. They need to analyze it, but how? So here, technology is helping us as a student, as a teacher, sorry. And students are not using it in the classes, and this is something that we need to fix. So what about their technologies? We normally says that GIS, geographic information data, it's very interesting because we can use data that students can collect, they can upload it to platform, produce a map, to understand how things are spread over the spaces, namely understanding how data is organized by cluster, for example, and understand it. And using these, they are thinking critically the data, and they can then solve problems with more information. So GIS is very, very interesting and a very important tool to use in the classroom. So what we have now is the growing of immersive technologies, the virtual and the augmented reality. I'm saying for a long time that augmented reality has a very good contribution to help teachers to teach their subjects. When we talk about augmented reality, students still be in their environmental, they still be in the room, in the space, in the garden, but they have a tool that can bring information, animated information, to understand the subject. So those are two crucial tools to teach geography, because we teach students to understand the space. And those tools is namely the GIS has a long tradition in understanding the spatial relation of the subject. So we work with data more than 60 years ago, and now the great advances in GIS is that they are also taking the advantages of the internet. Now we can work with story map, for example, where we can introduce the videos, the photographies, the audio, and create with data, create maps, animated maps, and so on. So this is not so difficult to work as it was in the last years. Now it's very easy for students to take data, run them, their environments, and put it in a map and analyze it and understand how things occur in the space. And what about the augmented reality? We can bring all of these things to a technology, to a platform that they can use their devices to access also to this information, not all for the animated data, but to all this geographic information we are working for a long time. So we know that students are taking more and more time using, for example, social networks. So it's very interesting when the students are creating that with their data, creating their maps and sharing it with everyone. This is what they do in their daily life. We know that students do it, not in the classes, but outside, because it's easier. It's easier to take data, take a photo, for example, upload it, and share it in the map. So these kinds of innovations we have in geotechnologies, namely in the mapping ones, it's very, very interesting for teaching and learning. That's why we are talking about the neo-geography, not the traditional geography, but the new one where everyone is doing geography without knowing they are doing it, okay? Because they are working with data, they're working with space and information about space. We're talking about that and sharing it in the social network, for example. So we know that Europe is very focused in the digital transformation, also in education. So technology plays here a very important role. As I told, geotechnologies can help students to capture, to share, and analyze the feature information about the space and the things that occur during the time. For example, analyzing a fire, how things was occurring during the time and what is there expressed in the space. And look, everyone is using online mapping, just such as the Google Map, the Google Earth, the Earth View, the big maps, as the Waze, for example, the GPS. Well, they are using this for their daily lives. This is a very interesting tool to work with the subjects that we teach for our students since the elementary schools until the university. So these levels of education, we need to work with data, the space data and time data. We know that the web mapping is growing very, very fast. It's more easier to work with it. So it's not an obstacle to use it in the classrooms. Augmented reality also, it's very, very more easy to work with it. Consulting, mashups, geostics. Well, many concepts that now are arriving, and to express all of those technologies to help teaching geography. what about combining web mapping and augmented reality? This is very, very interesting subject to study. So it can help us to talk about subjects like climate change, global warming, natural disasters, oceanography, smart cities, transport, agriculture. It's all of the subjects that we work in geography. Everything is related with data. Everything is related with transformations over the space and the time. How can we teach this without technology nowadays? Well, it's very difficult to understand why in our classes in Portugal we are not taking advantages of those global technologies, geotechnology. So to promote the spatial and the critical thinking, to raise awareness about the global issues such as the climate changes, and to prepare students to lead with spatial data. They need to do it for every day, for their daily lives. They need to know how to work with web mapping, for example, in Portugal, to understand about the way they must build a building. Everyone needs to work with web map, for example, but if they don't learn it to do it in the classes, we are missing something. So we have everywhere some of the prepared technologies with remote sensing, GIS apps, story maps, and dashboards. Um, many of them are rising. We know that augmented reality allows the user to see the real world, but with virtual objects that are superimposed or composed with the real world. So the main thing is that the student still be where he is. If he is in the class, he can use the device to superimpose some information. For example, how a volcano is working, how a fire can be is done, or is, for example, how can we teach the global circulation of atmosphere? It's a very difficult subject to teach for our students, but we can see how the things is working with the device and help them to understand it. Well, virtual reality is another step, normally using glasses, so the student normally go out of the space where he is to immerse in other space. So for us, for geography, it's very interesting to be and to have the student in this place and understand the things around him using the augmented reality. And this is a very interesting research subject. We know it is growing very fast in the last years. Less, how can we combine GIS and augmented reality? And we think it's very, very interesting combination. GIS explores geographic data. Augmented reality offers an intuitive understanding of this data and information. And geography is always talking about data, is always talking about maps. So GIS and augmented reality enhance pupils' spatial reasoning and geographic literacy that is very interesting for their daily lives. So in our case study, we used three schools from three different spaces, because in geography we need to understand that the space is not influencing the knowledge and the results. For example, we try to understand how students, or what is about the knowledge and their information about the geotechnologies in schools from urban areas, transitional areas, and from rural areas. The space can affect the knowledge or the perception of the students. So we need to understand this also. So 55 students we used, and we put the student using GIS technology and augmented reality and try to understand if they already know those technology, or if they, and what about their opinion, their perception about the contribution of those technology for the learning process. So what we understand is that normally the students reveal that satellite image and GPS, web mapping, for example, they effective know those technology because they use it every day. Where they are with absence of information is when they are using geographic information system and namely the augmented reality. This is new for them in education. Most of them never use it in their daily. So we try to understand about the difference. Well, what about how can we see the difference between the different environmentals? And we saw, for us, a surprise that from students from the rural schools was the main, they were very good knowledge about those technologies. So not from the urban areas, what was expected, but from the rural ones and the rural students. Maybe because the difficulty to teach in those schools is very great, and teachers need to improve their capabilities to bring students to the knowledge and to surpass those difficulties. What about when we ask them about the perception of the influence of those technology and augmented reality on student motivation? We saw that after they use those technology, most of them agree or completely agree that it is very important to enhance their motivation. The problem of our students is that they go into the class, they need to go, they need to learn, but most of the time they don't want and they are not motivated to do that. So this using those tools, they are more engaged in the process of learning. Also, it created classrooms more dynamic, so they are more involved. They want to learn. And this is very interesting for us in geography teaching. They also recognize that it's very interesting to consolidate new contents. For example, the global circulation of atmosphere, it's very difficult to work this physical subject. So they can understand in the traditional method and then use those technologies to understand and to consolidate the information. And most of them also recognize that it's very interesting for the physical geography topics that is normally the topics that students don't like because it's more difficult. It's difficult to understand how the physical geography works. So it's very interesting to enhance those kind of subjects. So for us, you're still research most of those tools and those geotechnologies, but in the Marillion work, it was interesting to understand and to see how students from rural areas have been found to possess more knowledge in using geographic information systems, satellite image, web mapping, and also most of the geographic technologies. Most students use frequently GIS. It's not new for us, but it's difficult to understand how they don't use it in the classes because teachers are not using it. GIS students know and use the most of Google Maps, Google Earth, GPS, Waze. They know how to use it, but why don't we take this advantage to use it in the classroom? The students reveal a limited understanding of augmented reality, namely technology, but they recognize it is very interesting tool. And the combination of those technologies, they are very usefulness for the teaching process, and namely the geography teaching process. That is something we are trying to fight in Portugal to bring technology, because all of those technology that is spread over the space everywhere, they are geographic. They are geographic tools. So why geographic tools are not being used in classroom to teach geography subjects? So this is why those studies are very important in Portugal with our education system, and to see how to fight the difficulties we already have in this time. So this is what I would like to share with you. Thank you very much for your attention, and any question you have here, my contact, and I'll answer. Thank you.